Takiape. My name is Kevin Meager. I am Lakota Métis, unenrolled. My paternal grandfather grew up on the Cheyenne River Sioux Reservation and was a fluent Lakota speaker. My mother is from the Montana Métis people, a federally recognized, unrecognized people. And my Hunka dad was a very well-known Lakota Wichashawakan, that is a holy man, aka medicine man from South Dakota. And I am making this video to discuss what I've been seeing going on right now with our nascent indigenous rights movement here in the United States regarding the infiltration of it by far leftists who are hijacking it for their own agendas to the detriment of indigenous people. Before getting too much into this, I want to first touch base upon Lakota prophecy, and so that the listener can understand where I'm coming from. So, Lakota prophecy tells us that at this time, very soon, indeed in ceremony, the Tunkashlale, that is the grandfather spirits, recently told us that it's just over the next hill. That very soon all these great cataclysms, wars, civil unrest, and all these things are going to occur. Through this process, this land that is now called the United States of America will be cleaned, that is cleansed of the white man. That is, the white man will disappear from the land itself. And that us Lakota people and other indigenous people upon this land will be free again, and the buffalo will return. So I'm sharing this with information with you regarding this leftist infiltration of the present indigenous rights movement to try to assist as many indigenous resistance organizers as possible to be successful in the defense of their lands, waters, resources, for the welfare of their children and their people into the future until that prophecy is fulfilled. So with that in hand, I'll discuss what happened at Standing Rock. Okay. So, for about 20 years, off and on, I have been involved in activism, fighting against, corrupt tribal councils, throughout South Dakota. However, I was somewhat naive of the world of white, leftist activism and, resistance politics here in the United States, as was our traditional elders at Standing Rock. That is, our local elders. So what had happened is that our local elders had received advice that we should open up the camp to non-Indian supporters, and that it would make us stronger in resisting the DAPL pipeline. What happened when we opened the door was that we were flooded with mostly white, but yes, many Latino, anarchists and socialists who saw this as an opportunity to hijack the movement for their own agendas, as well as white radical feminists. This caused a lot of chaos in the encampments, and in the end, it ended up causing a lot of problems for the Lakota because the pipeline went in. So let me explain how. Initially, the camp that I was in, which was the Oceti Shikoin, which is the 7th Council Fire camp, was running fairly smoothly. We had a group come in to set up their large encampment there who had named themselves the Red Warrior Society and were claiming to be a legitimate Lakota Akichita, that is soldier society. However, they weren't. My understanding is that one of the main founders of the society, and this is what I've been told, who is from Pine Ridge, created the society with a handful of her relations, and within just a very short time, there was literally over 100 or more people in the camp that had come from other locations. Anybody that had been in the Oceti Shikoin camp knows for a fact that the Red Warriors had segregated themselves, had their own security detail, and the vast majority of their membership were actually Caucasians with some Latinos and a very, very small contingent of actual Native Americans. from what I was told by former Red Warriors, many of these Caucasians had been brought in from various locations, but a large group, especially from Chicago, a large contingent came from there, and that they were Antifa. So they were brought in to, I guess, bolster the size of the camp, and what they began to do throughout the latter part of the resistance, starting in October, was to engage in violent direct actions that were prohibited by our traditional local Lakota elder leadership. And these violent direct actions weren't really strategic violence. They were low-level violence that was just generally kind of misdirected whenever they would come in contact with militarized law enforcement, National Guard, local police. It was highly counterproductive behavior because they were utilizing black bloc techniques to avoid being arrested. So if anybody understands what black bloc techniques are, this is where an actor hides their appearance via bandana or some other disguise over the face to prevent themselves from being easily captured or identified. This was very counterproductive in our resistance because when the time came to make a stand, and that was the taking of Treaty Camp on October 27th, 2016, the Red Warriors, who had seized the drill pad ground several days before, I was there, I watched them do it, abandoned the drill pad to the feds and ETP, and then engaged in a riot with the militarized law enforcement in the middle of the road, rather than doing what our elders told us to do, which was to lock arms and get in a prayer circle. And by engaging in that riot, they legitimized the order put out by the law enforcement to shut it down because it was a riot, and then also shut down all media. And then they quite easily forced all these people back into camp with a truncheon line of about 20 riot officers deep. Meanwhile, most of their time was spent arresting us guys that were in the prayer circle. So the point being that black bloc techniques in regards to defending indigenous lands, waters, holy sites from destruction from corporate resource extraction policies don't work, because to be able to do that, you have to be willing to make a strong affirmative armed struggle stand, which should have occurred there at the drill pad location when the feds and the company came in. Something like what we had done during Wounded Knee in 1973, and then also the Mohawk had done at Oka in 1990, and then also the Mayan Zapatistas in 1994, 1995. So why did this happen? Okay. Well, the Red Warriors, as I've stated, were mostly and are mostly Caucasian, with some Latino and a few Native Americans, and they are Antifa insurrectionary anarchists. They use black bloc techniques to prevent being arrested so that they can continue to move freely in society, to go from event to event, struggle to struggle, to create disorder and chaos in the hopes of making a country ripe for revolution. So in their mind, Standing Rock was simply one stepping stone in a larger war and an agenda to destabilize the United States of America. Therefore, if they had actually built barricades on the drill pad, dug trenches, armed themselves like our warriors had done at Wounded Knee in 1973, and did a long-term sieged armed struggle to stop the completion of the pipeline, they would have gone to jail for a long time. They would have lost their freedom, and they would have been unable to engage in their struggle elsewhere. So, as a result of their behaviors, they ended up legitimizing the narrative of the feds. And what was that narrative? The narrative was that we were violent Indian militants with violent non-Indian leftist militants standing in the way of progress energy independence, and terrifying poor local white men, women, and children. It's the same manifest destiny narrative that's been used against us for 200 years. Back in the 1800s, the narrative of manifest destiny was, we were violent Indian savages standing in the way of American progress and civilization, and terrifying poor white men, women, and children who were just trying to settle and better the continent. So there it is. There you go. The Red Warriors gave the land to ETP and the feds. They gave them the drill pad so that they could drill that pipeline, and the pipeline went in. Once the land was taken and we didn't hold the land, basically after that, taking the drill pad, though possible, was highly impractical because it was heavily fortified and heavily guarded. Okay. This is very, very important for other indigenous rights activists to learn from our experience at Standing Rock. I encourage you to create your own separate resistance camps along the pipeline of Line 3 in Wisconsin, Minnesota, and any actions you're taking in Michigan. Make sure that these are only local Ojibwe within these camps are trusted American Indian allies that are allowed to enter. Do not let any non-Indian directly participate in any of your resistance actions. Try to keep your camps away physically from the camps of these non-Indian AntiFa and Red Warriors so that they can't hijack any resistance you might do later. And when the time comes and it's strategic, then use your First Amendment rights. Use your Second Amendment rights. Use your alludial rights. And make an armed struggle stand if necessary to protect your land, your water, your resources, the health and welfare of your people and children, and the future of your people. That is until the coming of the prophecy. So, let me touch upon the other indigenous actions I cited that were successful. Okay. In Oka, in 1990, a group of Mohawk took their burial grounds to block the city of Oka from expanding into that area for a golf course and then also for a resort. They held that ground for several months, and in the process, they won, and they held it through armed struggle. As a result, their burial grounds were not destroyed, and they did this by blocking non-local Indian or non-local untrusted Indians and non-whites, and whites. They block whites completely from direct participation in their resistance. Okay, now let's look at the Zapatistas in 1994-95. To protect themselves from their resources, that is their traditional resources and territory, being seized by capitalist interests outside of Mexico due to the implementation of the NAFTA treaty. They seized several thousand hectares of land and took some towns and fought a very short, bloody war against the Mexican government. And they won. They were able to receive concessions from the Mexican government, and they still, right now, are functioning semi-independently in Chiapas, protecting their lands and their resources and their culture. And they also blocked white participation in direct actions. They also blocked non-Indians from coming in. So why is this really important? Because when you block non-Indians, when you block whites from coming in and directly participating in your direct actions, you prevent it from being infiltrated, either by leftists like these socialist anarchists that are seeking another agenda and are just going to use your action as a pawn, or by those who are pretending to be a leftist organization or representing leftist interest, but are in fact agent provocateurs for the government, who come in to intentionally create violence to legitimize a Fed narrative, to undermine your resistance, and even to get your resistance shut down. And that's exactly what happened at Standing Rock. the behaviors and violence of the Red Warriors, who, by the way, after the riot that they initiated on October 27, 2016, were asked, I believe, on November 1st or 2nd by the Tribal Council under the request of traditional elders from Standing Rock. They were asked to leave. There was a motion passed by the Tribal Council for them to leave because of their violence. They didn't leave, by the way. They later orchestrated the Backwater Bridge battle, which once again was a violation of our elders' orders, which was to not disturb that barricade on Backwater Bridge. They went and did it. They started that battle, and a bunch of very ignorant, perhaps sincere, non-Indian activists that were there for a short time and didn't understand the internal dynamics going on in camp fell into the narrative being promoted by the Red Warriors that the camp was going to be taken, and that the ETP and that the National Guard and that the local law enforcement were coming over the barricade to take the camp. And so a bunch of them ran up there, and that's how that battle got going. So eventually, in early December, the Red Warriors claimed to have left, but they didn't leave. They infiltrated many organizations and departments in Standing Rock, in the Oceti-Shokoin camp, with the intent of continuing their low-level insurgent warfare, which was actually not helping us protect our land, water, resources, but was helping them push forward their revolutionary agenda, which had nothing to do with what we were trying to do at Standing Rock. This is a quick point I want to touch upon. It's clear to me that's what's happening is we have Lakota and also other indigenous persons who are collaborating with these leftists to get them into our camp to hijack our resistance efforts. Many of these persons are baby boomer era women who are heavily indoctrinated in the white feminism of the 1970s, and who, quite frankly, lack a lot of traditional knowledge, at least among the Lakota, because they spent years drinking, drugging, partying, finally sobered up, and now they want to feel important. So they lie about our culture. They alter the teachings of our cultures so that they better fit in to the narratives and the agendas of the white leftists that they want to ally with, and that who are also supporting them in their objectives and agendas, perhaps funding their nonprofits through donations, etc. So this is important because when I talk about the Red Warrior Society, it is ludicrous that the Red Warrior Society could be run or founded by a group of women, particularly Ojibwe women, which we didn't even know. As is common knowledge to everyone, Tara Huska and Winona LeDuc were heavily involved in the Red Warriors. Tara herself was an avowed Red Warrior. And the woman out of Pine Ridge that helped form the Red Warriors was going around saying that the Lakota are a matriarchal society and that warrior societies could be run by women. This is simply not true. The Lakota are a traditional patriarchal society that is under the traditional chief system, which we call the Nacha. We have never been matriarchal. And if you want to learn more about this, please feel free to go to my blog site, Traditional American and Indian Alliance, and read my pieces, my posts, and my articles that are up there. And you're also more than welcome to read my Facebook timeline and the pieces that I put up there exposing this. So quickly, referring to the Akichita societies, that is our warrior societies, a warrior society can only ever be run by a man. Women are not even allowed to engage in combat in traditional Lakota culture. This is because of the teachings we were given by the Tunkashale, the grandfather spirits. The grandfather spirits teach us that women should not go into combat because it will destroy or make sick their tamani. What is Tamini? In Lakota, Tamini translates in English to her water. It refers to the DNA within her ovaries. The DNA within her eggs, within her ovaries. So what the spirits were saying is that when a woman goes into combat, it will cause epigenetic damage on the DNA chain within her eggs. Thus, women are barred from combat because we want our children, our future offspring, to be healthy generation after generation. True Lakota Akichitas warrior societies are ancient societies. Everybody knows who's a member of these societies in our local community because the members of these societies mostly come from the communities. The warrior societies can only ever be led or run by men. As noted, women can't be in combat. But secondarily, the societies were given to men via dreams and visions by the Tunkashalale, that is the grandfather spirits directly. The grandfather spirits also gave to these men in ancient times the various rituals that would be associated with that warrior society. It's completely ludicrous for the Red Warrior Society to go around claiming that they are a legitimate Akichita warrior society when they're run by women. Some of the women aren't even Lakota. They did not receive these things in dreams and vision because women are forbidden from running such societies. And also 90% of their membership is Caucasian and Latino AntiFa. Okay, so this gets right to the fact that basically the Red Warriors stole the credibility of the Lakota tradition to basically mask themselves and their plans about what they were going to do. Okay, so this feeds right back into what I was talking about in my reference to our resistance, our indigenous resistance organizers elsewhere, particularly in Ojibwe country right now. You have to block these people from having direct participation in your camps, in your resistance actions. They are not going to obey your elders. They're not going to obey your will. They're obeying the will of someone else. These are the people that are running the Red Warrior Society. And perhaps, in my opinion, also the feds. I encourage you to go to my blog post, Traditional American Indian Alliance. It appears to me, and it is my belief, that the GOONs, that the Red Warrior Society is partially being run by federal operatives who have a long familial history being connected to the GOON Squad, which was a far-right paramilitary organization created and funded by the federal government and armed on the Pine Ridge Reservation in the 1970s that was killed traditional Lakota who resisted them. I would encourage you to read that article. Now, why am I putting out this post right now? Recently, I received an email, I believe from the Pipeline Legal Action Network, which appears to be a retooling of the legal collective that was at Standing Rock. Now, I was told by people that were involved with the original legal organization called Red Owl that Red Owl had basically been taken over by white anarchist and socialist lawyers that follow around these Antifa kids that go from action to action, that they hijack for their own agenda, and they get them out of jail. And so what I was told by these people is that Red Owl had been taken over by them. Red Owl had been purged of those that didn't agree with these new lawyers that came in. And then it was renamed. And now it's calling itself the Pipeline Legal Action Network, I believe. In this email, the person that sent it was calling me comrade and using slogans like onward in struggle, which are slogans used by socialists, and comrade is a form of greeting used among socialist, anarchist, and various other revolutionaries. I sincerely doubt there was an Ojibwe grandma sitting there with them, telling them to call me comrade and shouting onward in struggle as they were writing this email. It's clear to me, at least it is my belief, it appears to be, that these same interests, these far left AntiFa socialists who hijacked the Standing Rock resistance for their agenda and actually ended up causing the pipeline to go through and getting our camp shut down because they created violence that legitimized the narrative of the feds that the camp was violent and had to be shut down to protect public welfare. These same groups now have become entrenched at the Line 3 resistance. It's very, very important that the Ojibwas act soon to take control of the Line 3 resistance from these infiltrators and possible agent provocateurs. Really, at the end of the day, what happened at Standing Rock is you had a group of white and Latino anarchists and socialists following a Western ideology fighting against another group of whites with a capitalist ideology. And they were using Lakota lives to do it. And they did harm us. They deeply harmed us because the pipeline went through. I saw the Red Warriors abandon the drill pad ground to ETP and the feds. I saw them repeatedly engage in unconstructive, unstrategic violence that certainly helped their agenda of creating chaos in as many locations as possible for revolution in the country, but certainly didn't help our agenda of stopping the pipeline. So I encourage Ojibwe resistance organizers and any indigenous resistance organizer anywhere to be very cautious of this and to make moves to stop this infiltration and thus hijacking of your resistance, because in the end you will be harmed. This may be the first video of many. Please click the link to my blog site, the Traditional American Indian Alliance. Please go to my YouTube page, my Facebook page, Kevin Meager, and then also click to subscribe. I wish you well. God bless. Wopi Latanka. Doksha.